It was a humid July morning in 1996. The cicadas were buzzing, the air was thick, and the small town of Nutley, New Jersey was just waking up. Around 12:30 p.m., Susan Walsh stepped outside her apartment just to make a phone call. She left behind her keys, her purse, her pager, everything she owned. She told her husband she'd be back in half an hour. But Susan Walsh never returned. This wasn't just any missing person. Susan was a fearless journalist, one who had investigated the Russian mob, exposed the seedy underbelly of New York strip clubs, and stepped deep into the shadowy vampire subculture. She was chasing dangerous stories, and someone, somewhere, may have wanted her silenced. Today, we revisit the case that has haunted police, journalists, and her loved ones for nearly 3 decades. The mysterious disappearance of Susan Walsh. Scene 1. Who was Susan Walsh? Susan Walsh was born Susan Merchant in 1960 in New Jersey. She was intelligent, striking, and fiercely ambitious. From a young age, she was drawn to words, writing poetry, stories, and later articles that peeled away society's polite veneer. She studied at William Patterson University, majoring in English. College life, however, came at a cost. To fund her education, Susan took work as an exotic dancer in nearby clubs, a job she didn't hide, and one she would later write about with raw honesty. In 1984, she graduated, diving headfirst into New York's rough-and-tumble media world. Her work ranged from poetry readings in Greenwich Village coffee shops to gritty, unflinching articles for adult publications like Screw Magazine, and eventually The Village Voice. But Susan wasn't content with easy stories. She chased danger, stories that most journalists would never dare to touch. Scene 2. The dangerous investigations. By the early 1990s, Susan was working on some of the most dangerous investigations of her career. One of her most notable pieces exposed the Russian mob's control over New York's strip clubs, detailing how immigrant women, many from Eastern Europe, were lured into the sex industry, then trapped by debt, intimidation, and violence. But there was another subculture that caught Susan's attention. One far stranger, but no less dangerous. New York's underground vampire scene. These weren't just costume-wearing goths. Some members claimed to be real vampires, engaging in blood rituals and late-night gatherings that blurred the line between performance and obsession. Susan immersed herself in this world, even dating a man who claimed to be a vampire. She pitched her findings to The Village Voice, but the article was rejected for lacking journalistic distance. Friends began to worry. She was getting too close to people who lived in the shadows, and some shadows bite back. Scene 3. The day she vanished. July 16, 1996 was an ordinary Tuesday, at least at first. Susan had been living in a modest apartment on Washington Avenue, sharing custody of her 11-year-old son with her estranged husband. That afternoon, she told her husband she'd be gone just 30 minutes to use the payphone across the street. She left everything, her purse, her wallet, her keys, even her beeper, inside. But there's no evidence she ever made that call. Later, investigators would note something odd. The page for July had been ripped out of her calendar. Witnesses reported seeing a woman who matched Susan's description getting into a limousine that day. But the lead went nowhere. No body, no ransom note, no confirmed sightings. Just silence. Scene 4. Theories and shadows. So what happened to Susan Walsh? One theory is mob retaliation. Her Russian Mafia expose may have made her a target. Another, something out of a horror novel, is that her work on the vampire scene put her in contact with dangerous, unstable individuals. Some insiders claimed she knew too much about the group's darker rituals. A third theory, Susan walked away voluntarily. Friends say she was under enormous stress, dealing with illness, depression, and paranoia. She'd recently stopped taking medication, and one filmmaker friend noticed her mental health spiraling. Of course, there's always the simplest explanation: random foul play. A predator could have seized the opportunity when she stepped outside alone. The truth? It's locked away with whoever last saw her alive. Scene 5: Legacy and Lingering Questions. Nearly 3 decades later, Susan's case remains open, but cold. Her brother has fought tirelessly to access investigative files, frustrated by the lack of progress. Susan's work has lived on in unexpected ways. Her research influenced books like Piercing the Darkness by Catherine Ramsland, which explores vampire culture. And her son, now an adult, has continued to seek answers, refusing to let his mother's name fade into obscurity. But the trail has gone cold. No physical evidence, no confirmed sightings, just the unanswered question: what happened to Susan Walsh? Susan Walsh was more than a headline. She was a mother, a daughter, a writer who walked straight into the places most people fear to tread. She sought truth in the shadows and vanished into them. Maybe someone somewhere knows exactly where she went that summer afternoon. Until they speak, Susan's story remains an unsolved mystery.